Children of Gaia, the Great Nations of Rendaraia. Dedication: The Great Nations of Rendaraia by Jan Kazanjian, second son of Kazanjian Tal, first daughter of Jian Tal Nura. In memoriam to the Great Nations of Rendaraia, may the virtues they were built upon and the values they sought to embody forever remain intact. And from my love, Jack Schell.
Through the eyes of Jan Kazanjian, a bereft scholar, we're shown a vastly populated realm, full of diverse cultures and civilizations. In this compendium, we explore the history and culture of the 6 most prominent civilizations of Rendaraia, known as the Great Nations. We learn of their greatest achievements, and finally, their downfall. Left with little more than to preserve their memory, we come to understand Jan Kazanjian's hope against hope.
Introduction: A History in Compendium. My name is Jan Kazanjian. I am the second son of Kazanjian Tal, who is the first daughter of Jian Tal Nura. I was born and raised in Arillinis. As a young man, I was an Arillinis science scholar. The focus of my study was cataloging the many societies of Rendaraia in all her vastness. In the process of researching these societies, I saw and learned much in my travels from one great nation to the next. What I did not learn firsthand, I gleaned from the many travelers with whom I crossed paths, as well as from monks, scholars, scrolls, and tomes in the various and wonderful Great Nation libraries. From time immemorial, the Great Nations were the 5 cultural hubs of Rendaraia. These were the most powerful and influential of the many nations on our world. Thriving centers of tradition, art, and scientific knowledge inhabited by millions. Each had, over many thousands of years, come to excel in its own area of strength associated with one of the 5 proclivities of culture. There was Terra, known for its people's persistent advancement of spiritual understanding. Arillinis, where constant progress in science and medicine was a way of life. Lithicus, which celebrated devotion to the excellence in the arts. Danrock, the epicenter of architecture and metallurgy. And Noda, the nation of consummate shipcrafters and goods consigners. It took countless generations of cooperation for the Great Nations' collaborative social efforts to become so compartmentalized, each one slowly but surely growing into its role. None of them could have reached its potential as a specialized society, however, without the Hajjaskin, an intermediary nation of goods haulers and traveler transporters who connected the other 5 great nations with their mighty airship fleets. An old Hajjaskin idiom has always stuck with me. We are the arrow on the great nation's bow. The archer's bow is shaped like a half circle, a clear reference to our old metric standard, a circle being 10 and a bow being 5. And of course, the airship flying like an arrow. Many smaller nations and even smaller tribes worked in collaboration with the great nation nearest to them, and thus, through that great nation, they collaborated with the others as well. In this way, the innumerable societies spread out across Rendaraia had at least indirect contact with one another, and ideas and goods were shared throughout the lands. Still, there were many peoples who, for one reason or another, opted out of collaboration with the great nations. I've often pondered why any group would choose not to participate in this union. Perhaps some of the more peaceful cultures merely preferred isolation, maintaining their own purity in laws and customs, while others preferred to endure the rigorous warpath of the raider lifestyle. I was so intrigued by the nuanced differences in the many peoples of our world that I spent most of my early adult years toiling away in the libraries of Arillanus, working on cataloging their descriptions into a tome I called Regions of Rendaraia and Their Inhabitants. Not long before the arrival of my first few gray hairs, I traveled to the great nation of Danrock in pursuit of my studies. While there, I visited the capital amphitheater to hear the Danrockian minstrels play whenever I could. I suppose I became something of a fixture in the front row. Before long, I was invited to meet the ensemble and the Soundweaver of minstrels, COG, who was also the chief of archers in the Danrock High Guard. We hit it off right away, he and I. We became fast friends, and romance swiftly followed. Being that he already had 2 venerable appointments in Danrock, and I was a traveling scholar, I decided to settle down with him in Danrock. In time, I was appointed as a scholar of Danrock, and eventually became an apprentice of Ilus Janiru, the chief of scholars. I spent my days in the high library towers with my scrolls, and my nights in the moonlit gardens with my husband. Every cycle, Kajal would be invited to Soundweave at the Lithicassian capital amphitheater, and linger for a time instructing in the musical arts. How excited I was to go with him. While he worked, I would further my studies in the visual arts. Of course, I still made study pilgrimages to the other great nations from time to time as well, and when his schedule permitted, Kajal would join me. Life was good. In later years, the shock of the great nations falling one by one shook Rendaraia herself to the core. No one knew who, how, or why until it was too late for any of us. When Danrock fell, I was forced to flee, losing Kajal and everyone else I knew. Very few seemed to have escaped, and of those who did, I do not know how many have survived this long. I am loath to believe that I could be the only remaining Great Nation scholar, but nonetheless I feel that it is my solemn duty to keep the memory of the Great Nations alive, both in reverence for the past and in hope for the future. First, I will tell you of the Hajeskinish, as they were intrinsically part of all the others. With a somber reverence, I shall then recount the rest in the order that they fell.